This episode is sponsored by FusionAuth.
I've been an advocate for AWS SSO for a while, but the official tooling that you use to log in and work with various accounts within an AWS organization has been somewhat lacking, to put it extremely mildly. And that's why I was so happy to stumble across something called Granted recently. Before I dive into what it is and how it works, let me start by identifying what my rather peculiar use case looks like over here. First, I have an AWS Control Tower managed organization for the Duckbill Group, and that's replete with its AWS SSO access management. We have a bunch of accounts inside of that organization that we can assume roles within, depending upon who we are and what we're up to. So far, so good. Second, I have another AWS organization that contains a single account, and it's called shitposting. I'm not making that up. AWS account aliases are globally unique, and for some reason, nobody at the register or anywhere else bothered to snap that one up. So I did it. That is a completely separate and distinct AWS SSO installation to which I have to authenticate. Third, I have a wide variety of roles that I assume in client accounts, and those never tend to last very long because our engagements at the Duckbill Group are by design short-term. But any given client is going to have anywhere from 1 to thousands of AWS accounts that we have to do bill analysis on. It's fun. We're increasingly rolling out automated tooling for a lot of this, but occasionally there's still no substitute for looking directly at the resources inside of an account. Fourth, while I use a Mac at home because Apple, whenever I travel, I have a habit of only bringing an iPad with me. So whatever I use for account access has to also work either from an iPad or from a headless EC2 instance when I SSH into it. Fifth, I have a whole bunch of command line utilities that I use that have no real concept of AWS accounts and profiles and the like, because they just pay attention to the environment variables that AWS tooling likes to set in my shell environment. Sixth, as much as I like to tout the benefits of doing everything via either the CLI or a variety of API calls, that is of course a lie. Lying is a foundational tenet of ClickOps after all. Therefore, I need to be able to log into a number of different AWS account consoles, ideally at the same time without having to go through an obnoxious process of having to manage a whole mess of IAM usernames and passwords. Seventh, and finally, because it's a vast world and it takes all kinds to live within it, I do have a couple of legacy accounts that only have IAM credential sets. Now, that basically covers it, as well as explains why I'm so sad all the time. Once upon a time in previous jobs, I kept long-lived IAM credentials on disk because I was a dangerous fool. I now know that this was wrong and have taken steps to not do that anymore. It could have been worse. Those credentials might have been for the AWS root user account. Never do this. For a while, I've been using 99 Designs. Their tool is excellent. AWS Vault is its name. It stores IAM credentials in a local encrypted password store. That's the keychain on Mac OS. On Linux, it uses the pass utility. I'm sure it does something on Windows, but that's not my problem. So you don't have long-lived credentials sitting around unencrypted on disk. That's good, but Granted is better. I've experimented with the AWS SSO CLI tool, which, while it is excellent, didn't quite suit me ergonomically. I've also used the official AWS CLI to log in via SSO, but okay, well, let's just say that while it's gotten better lately, it's pretty clear that someone on that service team at AWS has a bonus that is based on how many characters their customers have to type when working with the tool. And now I use Granted instead. Every application needs authentication, presumably. But just like deciding to buy a car rather than create your own, there are some things where it's safer not to build it yourself from spare parts. Auth is one of them. In fact, I dare say that doing that with Auth would be awful. FusionAuth is authentication built for developers by developers. They know how to put developers in the driver's seat, but also how to keep them out of the pilot's seat because everyone flying their own helicopter is both insane and terrifying. What's cool about FusionAuth is that you can host it yourself anywhere you want, or if you're not into that, they will host it for you in a private, dedicated instance in the cloud instead of a shared service. They have a free version that has no limit on volume, and thousands of applications depend on it today. They know auth, they're not zeros, if you know what I'm putting down. So before you build it or get stuck with an expensive alternative, check them out at snark.cloud/fusion. Check them out at snark.cloud/fusionauth. They're not awful. I originally discovered Granted a while ago, but haven't talked about it like this until now because I spent that time lobbing GitHub issues at their repository and obnoxious leading questions at the community developers in the community Slack. There were a few strange issues, a few unsupported use cases from the list I just went down, and above all, I wanted to get comfortable enough with the tool so I didn't have to take this video down in 3 more weeks after something better comes along. It's pretty solid now. On a Mac, you get it installed with effectively brew install, and you're there. On Linux, it's of course, just grab a binary off of their website and then put it into place by hand, and that's the state of the art because I don't like Linux packaging either. Nobody does because it's trash. It'll be fine, keep watching. The package comes with 2 commands, granted and assume. Granted controls settings for the utility itself. It's worth pointing out that it, of course, respects the AWS configuration file in the user's home directory, so populating that with the roles that I care about was a bit of a lift. Ben Kehoe has a tool called AWS SSO util, and it was super helpful. It required a bit of tweaking to get the profiles named the way that I want them to be, but that's a me problem. Take a look into its ability to generate AWS config files based upon what you have access to log into. It's terrific for generating a configuration file that a human being can get value out of. Granted also lets you configure what browser you're using. Assuming you're not running on a headless Linux instance somewhere, you're gonna wanna use Firefox for this one. Spare me well, I use Chrome or Brave or Edge or Safari or whatever the hell it is you wanna use, protests. I'm not saying this because I'm a zealot. I'm saying that for this specific use case, you're gonna have fun because Firefox has a multi-container capability that the Granted Firefox plugin works with. We'll get there. Once you've gotten Granted set up the way that you want, type the word assume, followed by either the enter key or the name of a profile. If you wind up going with just the enter key, it's gonna give you a list of all the profiles in your AWS config sorted by a frequency algorithm. Frequency, which is a real word, unlike PostgreSQL, means that you're combining frequency and how recent something was. As a result, your most commonly used options lately appear near the top of the list. Whack enter on that one, and you're either going to be kicked out to your web browser to authenticate via SSO, or be given a URL that just dumps to standard out if that's how you've decided to configure it. So once that's done, go to your website and sign in with SSO credentials. Cool. Once that's done, Granted will store the token it gets back in its configured credential store. Happens automatically, you don't need to copy and paste anything, and that token has a 12-hour validity window. There's none of the IAM, it's been an hour, time to log back in even though you were working nonsense, which is great. It populates all the usual environment and variables into your terminal, as you would expect, but wait, it gets even better than that. If you use the -C flag when writing assume and selecting which profile you want to get into, instead of setting environment variables, it will launch a session in your default browser, and here's why you want it to be Firefox. Because of Firefox's multi-container capability along with the Granted plugin, it will automatically launch this inside of its own container and add the name of the profile you're in to your URL bar in a unique color that represents that container. That means you can be logged into the AWS console into a dozen different accounts simultaneously. And for those of us who live and die by ClickUps, this is transformative. I would also strongly suggest that if you're using this, or anything else for that matter, detect and display the value of the AWS profile environment variable in your shell prompt, because otherwise it is just a matter of time until you operate on the wrong account and everything catches fire. It's also worth pointing out that the ZSH tab completion for Granted doesn't work the way I want it to. It does support fish, which is a shell made completely of nonsense, but that doesn't do me any good. That said, the developers and the community behind the tool are friendly and accessible. The code is surprisingly readable for someone who doesn't really know how computers work, and the documentation continues to get better bit by bit. What this means is that Granted is, to date, the best way that I've found to navigate logging into a truly disturbing number of AWS accounts. If you know of a better one, I would love to know what you found so I can find something new to make a video about.